Well, welcome back to this special edition of East Coast Podcast. If you are jumping on and you missed last week, you're going to need to go back and hear so that you're coming in on context. We've got Kerrie and Adrian Lumbewe here from Motivating Marriages, and they're psychologists. They're incredible people, and they've been helping us with what most families are probably feeling, which is the increased conflict and challenges and stress and pressure. And we finished up on a bit of a cliffhanger last week with the Four Horsemen.
Yeah.
Please take it away and fill in some gaps for us.
Yeah. So last week we spoke really about what we call the distance-to-pursuer dynamic occurring in marital conflict. That's where we have a state of flooding that occurs where heart rate goes above 100 beats per minute and we can't function in conflict very effectively. And what tends to happen is in a lot of relationships, not all relationships, but a lot of relationships, we have one person who is in the pursuit of resolution, and that must happen verbally. And then we have one person who is so overwhelmed and they shut down in that conflict. And so that's where we sort of left off, and we highlighted also backtrack, that's stonewalling when one person disengages. So we spent a lot of time talking about how you can prevent that dynamic in your relationship. So we do really encourage you to listen to last week's recording on that. It's such an important thing in this time of high crisis that we're in, where conflict is going to increase quite a lot. And then the cliffhanger we ended on, Lou, was the Four Horsemen. So we looked at criticism, defensiveness and contempt, and Adrian gave us a bit of a brief rundown on what those things are. And what we thought would be most helpful for couples today is to look at those in more practical terms. So what are these Four Horsemen, and how do we use what we call the antidotes to the Four Horsemen? So that comes from the idea that we can't sweep things under the carpet. We do need to raise issues in our relationship. And when we raise those issues, we have to do it in such a way that is actually going to generate a good outcome, because we want to be heard. And if we use criticism, we are not going to get heard. If we use defensiveness, again, our position, our side of things is not going to get heard. And certainly if we use contempt, that is going to render conversation pretty useless at that point. So we might just, do you want to have a look at criticism, Adrian? Yeah. Look at what it is and just the antidote to that. Yeah.
Just to set the scene as well, through John Gottmans' research, he demonstrated the damaging effect of all these horsemen, right? And basically, it's shown in the statistics. He can actually predict by watching the first, 3 to 5 minutes or something like that of a couple's argument, and if they were using these horsemen, then he could predict. I think it was above 96% or something like that. That in a 2-year follow-up of this couple, 96% of the time he was right when he said that couple will be separated and or divorced. So that's how 96% in research is unheard of. That is just massive. And so that he was able to actually predict, if you use these things, statistically speaking, that's potentially what could happen.
That makes it quite serious, like what we're talking about, and something to pay attention to.
Absolutely.
Without putting the fear of God into people, though, I think it's also important to say that what is important about that research is not that you're using the Four Horsemen, but you recognise that you're using them, and that you know how to repair the interactions after you've used them. You know how to correct your mistake. So the research is sort of saying, if these Four Horsemen are left to run rampant in your relationship without awareness, without correction, without repairing the damage that they cause, that's when the relationship is really at risk. Whereas when we look at happy couples, they use the Four Horsemen. They just know that they do it and they go, oh, sorry, and then they correct it by using the antidotes, which is what we're going to talk about now. So don't be too alarmed, but be very vigilant, I guess. That's is the key thing.
Because, I mean, you could easily, I'd be the sort of person be like, I use that, are we getting divorced? You know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the vigilance needs to be self-vigilance. Like, I think one of the things, we made this mistake when we first learnt the Four Horsemen. I remember the argument, it was in the garage, where we pointed the finger and said, you're using criticism, no, you're being defensive. And
Which is
that
criticism.
does not work. Take it from us, take it from our lots of experience with our clients. When they go home and try it, it also doesn't work.
I've used it, and we haven't actually touched on this, so it'll probably come up later about bids for connection.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I'm making a bid for connection.
And you're not
You
responding.
turn towards me.
You're turning away. You're turning against. Yeah.
Actually, it's pretty funny when I recognise that Lou's doing, you know, that bid for connection based on the course that we've done together, and at the start it frustrates me that she's using it on me, but then it kind of softens my heart, and then it kind of works, and I go, okay, I see what you're doing. But it actually does help. But
Absolutely,
anyway.
absolutely.
Well, that could be very much another topic that we talk about, bids for connection.
Yeah.
So if we were talking about the antidote to the horsemen of criticism, so just to recap, criticism is when we attack and blame each other, when we attack each other's character, when we use those you statements, you never, you always, stuff like that, when we actually attack the person, as I said, personally, in that way. So the antidote so instead of attacking the person, the antidote is actually using a gentle startup. That's what Gottman calls a gentle startup. Start the conversation up gently, right? So there's a few ways that you can do it, but there's a structure that, you know, people that are listening at home can actually use, and it's three statements. So it's, I feel, about, and what I need is. So if you can use those, what you're actually doing is you're taking responsibility for everything there, right? Yeah. So if, say for example, there's a pet peeve of mine in Kerrie's, in her walk-in wardrobe, in our walk-in wardrobe. And she will often leave all her clothes strewn over the track of the mirror. You know, the mirror that's supposed to very smoothly glide across the rail, but she leaves her clothes over there, right? So I can't actually open it on my side. So her side's open, but my side's not, right? So I could actually attack her critically. You always do this. You never think about me, right? Yeah. You're selfish. You know, I can't believe
thoughtless, disorganised.
Absolutely, all that stuff, right? Okay, you know, I could do that, but that would actually lead to a lot of defensiveness in my dear wife, of course, and then that will come back at me with criticism, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Instead of doing that, I can use the I feel, about, and what I need is. So I could say something like, well, I'll switch it around a bit. I'll say when. So, darling, when you leave your clothes over the track, I feel a little bit frustrated because I can't open my side of the mirror. Then I can't get to my clothes. What I really need is, and now you can say a practical need, but also you can say an emotional need. I'll use the practical need first. What I need for you to do is, can you just be a little bit mindful about what I need and to be able to access my side of the wardrobe there. So that's the practical need. Or I can say, I really want you to hear my request and need, and I want to feel respected. In this way, right? So that's the emotional need. And the beauty of the emotional need, if you can tap into your emotional need, your partner is unlikely to not want that for you. So if I ask Kerrie, do you want me to feel respected? The answer is yes, of course, right? Yeah. And that's how we can actually gently, using the gentle startup, we can gently actually ask or raise a complaint, I guess, with a person. And gently raising that complaint meaning we attack the problem, criticism is actually attacking the person. That's the difference between those two.
And so the antidote there in summary is to complain without blame. And that sort of then segues, that example that you use segues really nicely into then defensiveness. So I could, upon hearing Adrian's criticism, become like, oh, well, like I had to get ready for work and I had this really important meeting that I had to get to and I couldn't find the clothes that I wanted. I needed to look good and I didn't mean it. Like, it's not my fault. Like, there's not enough cupboard space. I've asked you to put extra racks up here, but you haven't done that. And so I could get really defensive and counterattack.
Absolutely. And so that's the counterattack. So what I feel then is that my criticism. Need is... Or criticism, but my need has totally been forgotten.
Ignored.
It's been ignored. I've actually raised an issue, but she has ignored what I've said, and now she's talking about herself. And so I get really defensive now, and I get contemptuous and attack back and whatnot. Sorry.
So I was just going to say that in defensiveness, so the defensiveness defensiveness can come when we are actually feeling attacked. So either we are being attacked because somebody's used criticism, or we might just feel attacked. And I think it's important that couples at home realise that if the Four Horsemen have been in your relationship for a long time, you can feel attacked even if you're not being attacked, right? Because you're very hyper vigilant to one another now and what's being said. And so I could feel attacked, or I might have been attacked with criticism. But if I start to feel defensive for one of those reasons, then rather than going into the counterattack or the innocent whining victim stance, which would be like, oh, you know, I can never do anything to please you. Like you really want the house so tidy and so neat, and I try my best, but, you know, I'm working full time and I'm trying to cook you really nice meals and do this and do that, and it's just, I can't ever do anything to please you. That would be the other form of defensiveness. Rather than doing that, what we need to do is take responsibility, and it's the total opposite of what we want to do when we're feeling defensive. We want to attack. But what the research tells us is that defensiveness rarely ever helps the problem. It actually just escalates it. So if you're feeling defensive, your heart rate's going to start climbing and you're going to start to get more and more distressed. And the more that you defend yourself, that continues. And interestingly enough, for your partner, they then start to get distressed as well. Whereas the total opposite, taking responsibility, is proven to de-escalate you, the defensive person, but it's also proven to help to de-escalate your partner as well. So in that example of the wardrobe, I would literally say something to Adrian like, yeah, you know, you're right. I know I left those clothes there. And I know that's really frustrating because you had to get up and go to work today and I didn't, and I know you had to get a shirt out, and it would have been really frustrating to have them there. I take responsibility for that. I'm going to try really hard to, which my arrangement is with Adrian, make my pile of clothes in the walk-in wardrobe just in one corner, not near the wardrobe. So that's how I'm going to try and help with that situation. And that will be enough for him. He will feel validated, he will feel understood, and I can still, you know, be the messy person that I am, but without having to change and conform to his set standards of behaviour. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the defensiveness. The other one is contempt. So we mentioned last time that contempt is the single best predictor of relationship dissolution. And in a nutshell, I think probably the best way to understand contempt is when your partner is sitting in their lofty little high house, you know, looking down their nose at you and implying in one way or another that they're better than you, smarter, better, neater, more organised. And what that actually does for the person who is on the receiving end of contempt is it makes you feel like your partner is disgusted in you or they despise you. And it's virtually impossible for us to have any conflict resolution when the person who is receiving contempt is feeling that level of disgust or being despised. And so what we need to understand with contempt and the antidote to contempt is below every bit of contempt that we show, so every judgment, every bit of scorn, every eye roll, every bit of sarcasm, there is a longing and there is a need that we actually have. And that longing or that need is not being fulfilled. And what we have to do is we have to bring that to the surface. And the antidote to contempt is very, very similar to the antidote to criticism, which is being gentle, stating what my feelings and what my needs are and explaining them to my partner, and then that my partner being able to reflect back and understand what my needs are in that situation. So it's really important, as I said before, to self-monitor these things. Don't point them out, but know when you're starting to engage them. And as we, I think, said either this week or last week, just it's so important to jump online and learn as much as you can about the Four Horsemen and those antidotes and how to begin using those antidotes in your relationship, particularly during this time when we're under such enormous amounts of stress. Yeah,
and I think for me, one of the early things that I learnt and apply often was the soft startup.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was learning it, and to just encourage people out there, is that I'd sometimes correct after I'd already started. So I'd have a bad startup and like fly into, like I've referenced my speeches last week, because that's how I just enjoy to let off steam, is maybe start a fight that Felix wasn't looking for. And then I'll just say, hold on, can I start again? You know, can I start again?
Good.
I'm feeling stressed.
Good,
I'm not coping.
Yeah.
and I'm frustrated,
Yeah.
in those things. And I think particularly at this time when we're all managing those close quarters,
Yeah.
even being able to identify, even if in the moment
Yeah.
you've flown off the handle or kind of done it wrong, is to start again. And that helped me.
Hugely, yeah.
And then there's other times when you're feeling a bit more capable, I want to bring up this issue, I'm going to start it in a good way.
Yep.
And you feel like
Yep.
you've had that headspace
Yeah.
to start.
Yeah.
And it does work, because when I feel myself boiling up and starting to escalate, and then when you actually wind down and go, okay, and start the soft startup, it actually escalates your own feelings, and like it calms you down as well, and so you can have a proper conversation without escalating into a big fight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about there, Lou, is what Gottman calls a repair. And Gottman's quote is, repair is a couple's...
happy couple's secret weapon.
Secret weapon against conflict. And repairs are defined as anything that de-escalates negativity and allows you both to get back on track, right, in that sort of way in the conflict. And so... if you know that you've been harsh and you've used a harsh startup, and I guess that's a really important point, is that we're not going to get perfect, and we will we'll make mistakes. But remember, even the happy couples make mistakes, but what they do differently to the ones that are unhappy is that they recognise it and they offer repairs. So in other words, start again. And can I start again? Let me say that a little bit softer. And then you change your tone, you change the way you said it, you take more responsibility rather than putting it on to Felix, say, for example. And then Felix, out of his own mouth, has just said that when Lou does that, I actually feel a lot better. I feel that I can take that and I can accept that, my responsibility within that, and then that sort of allows you both to then get on with what you need to do, rather than getting into this back and forth of the horsemen's flying back and forth, criticism, defence, and contempt, stonewalling, which just spirals out of control.
And nobody ends up feeling heard.
That's it.
So can I ask, say we recognise these four horsemen in our life, and we recognise that we're doing these things, and then we get to a point where, okay, we're understanding it and we can do these antidotes and the soft startups and things like that. What is the goal from there? Where do you go from there when we can have this calm conversation about an issue? What next from there? How do we get through a conflict? The challenge in... a nice way.
Well, especially, what's tricky is you've got the perpetual, which I think we touched on last segment. But that's hard, especially because for us, one of our major perpetual issues would be managing the house. And in amongst that is then the kids, because kids are a mess. And so my viewpoint is a messy house is a creative house. So the kids are going to be win at life, if they've been able to leave their toys out. Whereas Felix's perspective, and you can jump in, for him, he feels calm, in control when the house is clean. So we just have these opposite happy places. And then now having to watch each other.
Live out a messy house or a clean house. And I've noticed, with our finances, I guess would be one point. Felix says, because we know we can't solve that problem with the perpetual, it's looking at new ways to talk about it. And what would you say to people that have got these major perpetual issues at the forefront now? I think the first thing that we would say, it is a really great question, and I'm wondering how we can actually effectively answer this
in 20 minutes.
In the amount of time,
So let us have a crack at it, see what we can come up with. I think the first thing is really important, right? And it is what you were reflecting on, Felix. Okay, so we've worked out how to have a good conversation. So the rule of thumb is that understanding must always, always, always precede advice giving and always precede problem solving. Too quickly, couples are ready to move to problem solving, and they're too ready to move to giving advice or giving instructions. And what we find is that, 2 out of the 3 major conflict interventions that we teach people in couples therapy have nothing to do with problem solving. Because what we really, really need is understanding. So if we have a look at that example that Adrian and I shared about the messy clothes and whatnot, I've been messy my whole life. My mother can attest to that, and it will never change. Adrian's much neater and more organised than I am. And what we needed in that moment is for me to understand the frustration that causes him when he gets up in the morning to get ready for work and to get his suit out of the cupboard. He needed me to understand that this actually bothers me. Like, I feel stressed, I feel frustrated. And when I understand that, I'm actually a hell of a lot more willing to just make my pile of clothes in a different part of the walk-in wardrobe. So you'll find probably the first thing I'd say is that when you do understanding really, really, really well, compromise actually naturally follows in a lot of cases, not all of them, but in a lot of cases it does naturally sort of come a lot easier to compromise because it's the understanding that has been achieved. If you find yourself unable to understand, or you've understood but you're unable to move towards a compromise, then it's a matter of trying to work out, how do we go into this? Because this is really going into something a bit deeper. It's trying to ascertain what is my partner's core need. And Adrian referred to the emotional need before. Like, what is the core need? What is the root issue for my partner? So, Lou, you were talking about with the example of the house, if we just use that, there is a very different idea. Like, for you, it's like a messy house, it's a free house, it's a comfortable house, it's a house where everybody can feel relaxed and all that sort of stuff. And for you, Felix, it's this whole idea that, and I didn't get a full insight to it, so I'm going to hypothesize a little bit here, but it would be something I suspect along the lines of a clean house equals organisation, which equals calm, if it's something along those lines, right? And so what we need to do is we need to say, well, the actual issue, Lou, for you is you want a sense of freedom in your home. And the actual issue for you, Felix, hypothetically, is that you want a sense of control or peace or calm in your home. And so then what we're actually compromising about is what the core need is, right? And so that might mean that we have certain parts of the house that are really nice and neat. And we might have certain parts of the house that are really nice and messy.
Or certain that are locked, so no one can actually go in and they remain.
Totally, yeah. But it might be that. Like, we at home, I'm messy in the bedroom, but the rest of the house I want tidy. I'm a bit of an anomaly. And we actually did some renovations, and one wall of our house is this big white cupboard that goes from floor to ceiling, and it's huge. And don't open the doors if you ever come to my house. It's pretty bloody messy behind there, but I need that sense of, like, in my actual living space, I need to see tidiness. And so we might negotiate. Like, you might end up with a really nice cupboard, Lou, and it might just be that you just shove everything in there when Felix needs to have that space of tidy, yeah? So it's about trying to compromise on what your need is, not about whether or not the toys should be put here or the clothes should be put here,
right.
yeah? That's where we get stuck in conflict. It's like, dig into what's my partner's need, how do I help their core need be met in this situation?
The rule of thumb, I think, on that note is what Gottman calls accepting influence from each other.
Yeah.
Accepting influence.
Yeah.
And basically what that means is, how do I meet your needs without sacrificing mine? And vice versa, how do I meet my needs without sacrificing yours?
Yeah.
And once you've actually identified for each other what those actually inner core needs are, then if you apply that principle of accepting influence, meaning you've got to give a little, right? So if you want to be influential, you have to, or if you want to influence the other person, you've got to be influenced by them or be willing to be influenced by them. And that's the essence of compromise and negotiation. And so that's what you're really trying to get down to.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you're looking for a win-win situation,
You are.
right?
Yeah.
And, it's no point me feeling like, I've come out of this great, I've got everything I wanted.
Exactly.
But, my wife is just distraught after the whole conversation.
Absolutely.
And just that, you do want that, where we both come out winners.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is possible.
Yeah, it is definitely possible. And I think that's something that Adrian sort of said before, like, when you actually get to the heart of what your partner's need is, you don't want them to not have that need met. Like, I know Adrian's morning routine like the back of my hand. I don't even have a routine, I'm that disorganised, but I know his routine. I could, run my life by his routine. And it's so reliable and and it's so consistent. It's actually one of the things that, even though I don't have it, I actually love that about him, and it's a real grounding part of who he is for our marriage. And so when he has his routine in the morning of getting up, going and getting his clothes, getting organised, doing all the things that he does, I don't want him to not have that, because it's good for him to have it, makes him the man that he is. It's good for me to have it. It's nice and grounding, having a bit of structure and organisation to my chaos. And I actually don't want that need of his to not be met. And when we tap into that deeper need, you will find, actually, no, I do want you to have that sense of freedom in your house, and I do want you to have that sense of peace at home. And I think one of the ways, going back to your question, Felix, because this can feel a little bit hard for people to work out how to do in practical terms. And one of the things that we do in couples therapy is we get people to sit down in front of us with pen and paper, clipboard, right? And we get them to write this stuff down. So Felix, write down what is Lou's core need here, and Lou, write down what is Felix's core need here, and then work out together how can both of our core needs get met. And it's so important that we have a bit of structure around that, because we can get lost in the conflict if we don't focus in on those core needs.
And I think just what we've talked about now is really practical in this season and beyond.
Yeah.
Like how incredible if you find some of these tools that you didn't use and use them in a high pressure situation, you're going to come out the other end really strong, functioning really well. And I just encourage people to do these things and to practice, have a go.
Absolutely.
You can tell when you're practicing, and it's kind of cute, but whenever after we did the workshop, when I could tell that Felix was trying, exactly, your heart softens, it warms.
Totally.
You think you are investing in our marriage, and that matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the defensiveness goes. Yeah.
And you have more compassion, you have more understanding. And so the best thing to do is just have a crack at it and be your own judge and your own referee. Try not to point that finger too much. Just be self-aware of what you're doing and correct when you can. And when your partner makes a mistake or they need to correct something, allow them to do that. Have open arms, be willing to accept that repair, and be compassionate and let them have another crack at it. Yeah.
I'm not sure if we've got enough time. Would it be helpful if we did a bit of a role play to demonstrate to people what these horsemen are?
What it can look like?
What it can look like,
Go for it.
and then show you how to do it properly, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you want to do, I think one of the important issues that people might be dealing with might be because both parents are home now, workspace,
I think
tidy
so,
versus
yeah.
untidy, whatever, but we're all in each other's space now. What do you reckon? Something
Yeah,
like
I think that's a really great
I'll
one.
use that one.
And this one, it demonstrates contempt and it demonstrates defensiveness. And if you think we're good actors, it might be, just maybe, because we know these things ourselves. So you ready?
Yep. Okay. All right. Okay, Kerrie, now that we are in the same home, now that this whole COVID-19 is happening, right, and we're forced to stay home, you have to get your act together, all right? We're stuck in this study. Okay, we just built this study, right? Okay, we just renovated and all that stuff, right? But we're working very close to each other. Can you just look at my space there, right? You can see how well and tidy it is and how streamlined it is, right? That's the way you get stuff done, right? Look at your space there, okay? It's messy. It's unkempt. No wonder you can never sort of get home on time. I can't even imagine what your workspace is at home. At work. You never get home on time, right? You lose your keys all the time, right? I mean,
so you need to stop because you're just anal. Seriously, you're so anal. Everything has to be perfect. Everything has to be in its right space. Why don't you just live a little bit? This is your problem. This is why you cannot respond to things at the drop of a hat. You can't be spontaneous. You can't think on your feet. You can't solve problems. In fact, just butt out, right? Just butt out of my workspace. You go back to your little workspace. You deal with your little facts and figures over there, and you just leave mine to me because mine works well for me.
Okay. All right, okay.
So
That's not how to do it.
This is not how to do it. So you can see that in that example, Adrian started off really harsh and with a lot of contempt, a lot of judgment, a lot of, there's something wrong with you, you're so disorganised. And he just kept going and going and going. And I was starting to get increasingly, right from the first moment, increasing defensiveness, really just angry, and then I just wanted to lash out. And I came back with a pretty good dose, I thought, props for me, a pretty good dose of contempt right back at him, and a lot of criticism and defensiveness. And this is how it can happen. And I think it's important to know, just a quick, another little research finding, that it's in the first 3 minutes of any interaction, if we see any of the four horsemen present, there is a 96% chance that that conversation is going to go badly. So I don't even think we were talking for 3 minutes then, but we saw pretty much all of the four horsemen at play. So there is no chance that we can really recover from that. We actually need to sort of really separate at that point, because we've both gotten quite flooded. If it was a bit softer, that conversation, we could have used some repairs, but with that one we would have to separate, go away, calm down, and then come and have back that conversation again. So what we're going to do is show you the antidote now to that and have a much better conversation.
Functional conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. Dal, can I just raise something? You know, we're stuck at home together, you know, obviously for the next 6 months or so.
Forever, it seems.
Absolutely. And, you know, we've just renovated our office as well. It was a really nice office. I just need to tell you that I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Yeah. You know, because you know me, I like my space really sort of structured, you know, really tidy. I need to know where my pens are, where my, you know what I'm like, right? So, you know, when I sort of come to the office and, you know, some of your stuff is just spilling over into mine, right?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit, right? I feel a little bit overwhelmed, and I don't seem to be able to concentrate. You know, I just need that space to be able to have a clear head. You know, what I'd really like is what I really need is could we have a bit of a conversation? It doesn't have to be now. It can be whenever we're both ready. Can we have a bit of a conversation so that we can set some, I suppose, physical boundaries maybe you know, so that I can have my space and I can do the work, you know, work at my space the way that I feel comfortable with, but then you can as well. So I think just some boundaries there might be good, you know. Can we have that conversation?
Yeah.
Okay?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I know that you have a very organised desk and a very organised workspace, and I know that I have a very organised mess. And so we do live and we work really differently, but I do know that my organised mess spills over into your neat and tidy space, and I know that would frustrate you, because I know that would be frustrating. You'd probably even feel a bit anxious looking at my mess, I think.
Yeah, come to think of it, I do.
Yeah. So look, I think it's actually a great idea, because we are going to have to share this workspace for a fair bit of time now, and we do need to both be able to work quite the way we like to work. So I'm really happy to have that conversation maybe on the weekend when we've got a bit of extra time. If we're still allowed to go to Bunnings, maybe we can go and buy a divider or something. But I think that's a great idea. We'll have a chat about it over the weekend.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Awesome.
So
that's how we do that.
So good. And it sounds like when you hear it, it's so simple.
Yeah, it is.
But it's just doing it, and it's making that choice, isn't it? Yeah.
I think just a couple of key points to remember there is the Gottmans talk about the gentle startup as being gentle. And so some of the things that you might have seen Adrian doing, I don't know if he sort of put his hand on me or he just smiled when he was talking, and he just said, look, not, you know, big issue, but like something that we need to have a bit of a chat about. It's been bothering me a bit, rather than, okay, this workspace, it's out of control. This is the biggest thing since COVID-19 hit. It's more just like, let's just deal with this as an issue. It's a bit of an issue. It's irritating me. Want to talk about it with you. Want to talk about it gently with you. And that's the approach that we need. That's the most important thing with that gentle startup. And then taking responsibility where you can. You don't have to take responsibility for the whole thing. You don't have to go and say, I'm so sorry, Adrian. Yeah, I know my stuff is spilling over into yours. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that I've upset you. Don't have to go and, you know, grovel and bend over backwards, because I still want to retain an organic sense and true sense of who I am. I don't want to buckle and change for him, nor does he want to do that for me. But we do need to take responsibility for our part in it, you know, and if I'm still in his pens, which I would do, I'd probably chew on the end of them too, that would annoy him, and doesn't annoy me in the slightest, but I get that it would annoy him, and I know that I do it.
Yeah.
So taking responsibility is that really important part of that as well, and just choosing the right time to have it. So if you know within yourself that it's going to come out the right way, just go somewhere else for a little while. Just go to the garage, go to the bathroom, do something.
Go to the backyard. We're not sure where you'll be allowed to go when you're listening to this, but go there.
Go to the letterbox.
Yeah.
If I can just say, the difference between those two role plays, the first one that was very dysfunctional, the second one a lot more functional, the difference was that we were both taking responsibility for our portion rather than externalising it onto the other person, right? So, you know, instead of me saying that, you know, you're disorganised, you know, no wonder you are always late for work or you can never find your keys or whatnot, that's pointing the finger.
Yeah.
But really what's underneath that for me is that I feel overwhelmed. It's nothing to do with Kerrie. It's that I actually am responding to this space with a feeling of being overwhelmed. And so therefore, in the second example, the first words, or one of the first words out of my mouth, I think, was, I feel overwhelmed when, etc. And what I need is, using that sort of gentle startup structure. And both of us, as I said in the second scenario, was taking responsibility for our own stuff rather than putting on the other person.
Well, that's so good and so important. And I think you've given everyone some homework for this
Lovely.
week. Hope you do well. And we'll catch up next week, I think, talking about repairs, which are really important, and especially engaging with the children, which is a big deal and probably a big factor for families that are listening out there. So
Absolutely.
we'll catch you next time.
Excellent.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, guys.